reception of His Majesty and Olori. All others, please stand and remain standing.
Okay, Ikere Ekiti, from 1969 to 1975. The secondary school from 1976 to 1979. He attended the then Ondo State University, Ado Ekiti, between 1983 and 1987, where he obtained a bachelor's degree in English/education. He later obtained Master of Arts in Education and PhD in Guidance and Counseling from Obafemi Awolowo University in 1995 and 2003, respectively. He had a postdoctoral fellowship in human sexuality from the University of Amsterdam, Netherlands, in 2006. Professor Popoola joined the services of the university in 1997 as an assistant lecturer and rose through the ranks to become a professor of guidance and counseling in 2010. Professor Popoola has numerous accomplishments as a professional teacher and counselor educator. He has over 60 publications in both local and reputable foreign outlets. He has supervised 13 PhD candidates and 15 master's students, some of whom are now professors. He served as a resource person. He served as a resource person to the University Consultancy Service, UNIFEX, and a research consultant to the Federal Ministry of Education, the UNICEF, and International Organization for Migration. Professor Popoola is a member of many reputable professional associations, including the Counseling Association of Nigeria, Association of Professional Counselors in Nigeria, Association of Counselors and Psychotherapists in Africa, and the International Congress of Psychologists. Professor Popoola has served in several administrative and leadership capacities within and outside the university, including head of department, deputy provost of postgraduate college, and dean of the Faculty of Education. Professor Popoola is currently the Vice-Chancellor of Adeyemi Federal University of Education, Ondo. He is married to Temilola Popoola, and the marriage is blessed with children. I think we can give more round of applause to him. Prof, it's now the time for you to deliver your lecture. Thank you very much.
Mr. Vice-Chancellor, sir, members of the academic community, gentlemen of the press, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I stand before you today to present the 417th inaugural lecture of the Obafemi Awolowo University in recognition of God's mercy and faithfulness in my personal and professional life. This inaugural lecture is the 21st in the Faculty of Education and the 5th in the Department of Counseling and Human Development. The first inaugural lecture in the department was delivered in 1985 by Professor Olumakinde, who was the founding head of the department. Today's inaugural lecture is the 5th in the department, following those of Professor Olumakinde, Professor Obidi, Professor Yara Afolabi, and Professor Olubukola Ojo. Vice-Chancellor, sir, standing before you this evening to deliver an inaugural lecture in one of Africa's most prestigious universities is someone whose life's journey and education are living testimonies that there are invisible, unmistakable, and unstoppable hands of God in the affairs of men. Having lost my father at the tender age of 2 years, my mother, now of blessed memory, took up the challenge of raising me as a single parent, and I ensured that I was enrolled in an elementary school. I attended the local authority primary school, Ikere Ekiti, from 1969 to 1974. I was not privileged to attend a secondary school because my mother could not afford the cost. However, by divine inspiration and uncommon grace, I studied all the secondary school subjects on my own and attended the teacher training college in Ikere from 1979 to 1982. Thereafter, I attended the Ondo State University, Ado-Ekiti, between 1983 and 1987, where I obtained a Bachelor of Education degree and later the Master of Arts in Education and PhD in Guidance and Counseling from the Obafemi Awolowo University in 1995 and 2003, respectively. I joined the services of this great university as an assistant lecturer in 1997 and rose through the ranks to become a professor of guidance and counseling in year 2010. If there is any lesson in my story, it is that a man's disadvantaged background can never prevent God from achieving his divine purpose in a man's life. At all stages of my educational journey, the divine hands of God that held my life were always greater than the circumstances that disadvantaged or threatened it. Today, as I reflect on my life's journey, I do so with a sense of gratitude to God as I present this 417th inaugural lecture of the Obafemi Awolowo University. Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I am fully aware that this lecture is coming 16 years after I was appointed a professor of guidance and counseling by this university. Some people here today may wonder, and justifiably so, why it has taken this long to deliver an inaugural lecture. We all know that the university, in keeping with its tradition, encourages the early delivery of inaugural lecture. However, I wish to submit that a delay in doing this does not in any way diminish the quality or significance of the message of the inaugural lecture. The Obafemi Awolowo University has a rich history of distinguished and very brilliant scholars whose inaugural lectures were delivered many years after their professorial appointments. Yet, many of these scholars remain intellectual juggernauts, commanding respect and driving scholarship in their respective disciplines. This reinforces a simple but profound truth, that the value of an inaugural lecture lies not in how early it is delivered, but in the quality of thought and the weight of experience and contribution it presents. I make bold to say that the long years between my professorial appointment and the delivery of this lecture are not years of idleness, but of invisible preparation, of refining thought, of consolidating research, and of transforming experience to wisdom for the benefits of academia and the society. I like to use an image which is familiar to all of us. The farmer does not rush the harvest before his appointed time. The yam tuber buried in the soil may appear idle, but while it remains idle, the roots are forming, the nutrients are gathering, and the tubes are deepening until the fullness of the season. If uprooted prematurely, it yields little, but when harvested in due season, it yields plenty and provides nourishment for all. So it is with today's inaugural lecture. If this lecture had been delivered much earlier than now, it would have been, at best, a catalogue of my past research publications and scholarly achievements. But because it is delayed, it now encompasses both my scholarly achievements and the experience and wisdom gained in the many years after I was appointed a professor. In this light, I am reminded of the timeless words of Scripture as expressed in Galatians 6, verse 9. In due season we shall reap, if we faint not. That due season is not always ours to determine. Oftentimes, it is dictated by the readings of life and the providence of God. But when the season comes, the harvest is sweet and the fruit endures. Mr. Vice-Chancellor, sir, distinguished audience, esteemed colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I have titled this inaugural lecture, "In the Multitude of Counselors, There is Safety." This title was inspired by the timeless wisdom of Scripture, specifically from Proverbs 11:14, which reads, "Where no counsel is, people fall, but in the multitudes of counselors, there is safety." This verse from the Holy Bible, though written thousands of years ago, is extremely relevant to the realities of our world today. It reminds us that no person, no family, no institution, no professor, no vice-chancellor, and no nation can safely journey through the vicissitudes of life without counseling. My choice of the lecture title is not accidental, it is intentional. As a young boy many years ago, I experienced moments of confusion and indecision about the path to take, the choices to make, and the burdens to carry. It was the gentle but firm counsel of my late uncle, a teacher, mentor, and spiritual father, Pa Rufus Akinola Oluwatosin, that guided my steps. Unfortunately, Pa Akinola is of blessed memory and is not here today, but I wholeheartedly dedicate this lecture to his memory. His counsel not only preserved me from costly mistakes, but also planted in me the seed of passion for education, which has now grown into my lifelong commitment to the guidance and counseling profession. For me, it is not an overstatement to argue that God himself is the first professional counselor. From the very beginning of creation, God established the eternal principles of guidance and counseling. After creating Adam and Eve, he did not abandon them to uncertainties and a directionless life. Instead, he sat them down in the Garden of Eden and held the first group counseling session with them. Whether or not they benefited from the counseling session or prefer to reject divine counsel is a story for another day and perhaps for another inaugural lecture. For now, it is sufficient to know that during the counseling session, God gave Adam and Eve divine guidance by telling them what to do, what not to do, what to love, what not to love, what to eat, and what to avoid. This divine encounter represents the earliest form of guidance and counseling in which God's action is profoundly significant. It reveals that counseling is not a modern invention of psychology or education, as many have claimed, but an important part of the very blueprint of human existence. From that point onward, mankind has always needed guidance and counseling to enable them choose right, to live meaningfully, and achieve self-actualization. Just as Adam and Eve required counsel to navigate the Garden of Eden, so also every generation today, every society, every nation, and indeed every education system requires guidance and counseling to navigate the complex gardens of life. This lecture, therefore, seeks to illuminate the usefulness of counseling as God's gift to mankind, a gift that nurtures students in their pursuit of knowledge, empower individuals to discover their purpose, strengthens families, and equips societies to flourish. To embrace counseling is to embrace safety, and to reject it is to expose oneself to unnecessary danger. For in the multitude of counselors, there is indeed safety. And so, as I proceed, I'll be sharing with this august audience my almost 3 decades of academic research, during which I have consistently demonstrated the safetiness of counseling to all education stakeholders. Just as the scripture stipulates that the multitude of counselors provides safety to the people of God, so my research energy for almost 30 years has been directed to using counseling to provide safety and direction to students, teachers, families, and leaders entrusted with the destiny of nations. What is counseling? Mr. Vice-Chancellor, sir, today, as we live in an increasingly complex world, the need for counseling has become extremely more important than ever. Unfortunately, despite its indispensability, counseling is one of the most misunderstood professional activities in the helping professions. A review of contemporary definitions of counseling shows that it is a purposeful, professional, and relational process. Chesson and Stone, 1968, described it as a process occurring within a one-to-one relationship between an individual troubled by problems he cannot cope with and a professionally trained worker whose experience equips him to assist others in solving their difficulties. The key elements in Rogers' definition are the concept of process, professional competence, individualized help, and personal difficulties. Thus, counseling is not a casual interaction, but a structured engagement grounded in training, ethical responsibility, and professional practice. Similarly, Egoshuku 2007 defined counseling as a process whereby a troubled person receives help to feel and act in a way that is more personally satisfying. This happens when the client interacts with the counselor and the counselor provides information or feedback that encourages the client to change his or her behavior. This definition emphasizes guidance and counseling as an interactive process that ensures clients' independence while enhancing their personal growth. In all the definitions, certain common elements stand out: that counseling is a process, it is relational, it is professional, it is ethical, and it aims at helping individuals understand themselves and make meaningful choices. However, to fully appreciate the meaning of counseling, it is also necessary to identify its popular misconceptions by highlighting what counseling is not. As depicted in Figure 1, counseling is not merely the giving of information, even though information may be judiciously provided within the counseling process. It is not merely the giving of advice, suggestions, or recommendations in the sense of assuming responsibility for the client's decision, though advice may be given during the counseling process. However, when advice is given, it must be clearly identified as such and handled with ethical caution. Counseling is not the manipulation of attitudes and beliefs through persuasion, subtle coercion, or moral pressure, nor is it the influencing of behavior by persuasion, threatening, or compelling a client to behave in a particular way. From the many definitions and delineations of counseling, one thing is clear. Counseling plays a vital role in promoting the client's general well-being, especially in the face of challenges such as anxiety, procrastination, poor academic performance, and poor study habits. Rooted in the principles of empathy, client-centeredness, and evidence-based intervention, counseling emphasizes the holistic development of clients, addressing not only academic issues, but also the emotional and psychological barriers to learning and development. As important as counseling is in the Nigerian educational system, school counseling services are often underutilized, misunderstood, or insufficiently integrated into the academic work. Where school counselors are available, their roles are frequently limited to administrative or disciplinary duties rather than proactive psychological interventions. Yet, trained counselors are uniquely positioned to implement structured therapeutic programs to address performance-related anxiety in a developmental appropriate and culturally sensitive manner. Now I want to look at counseling as a helping profession. In the section that follows, I have described counseling as a helping profession, a classification it shares with disciplines such as teaching, social work, pastoral care, psychiatry, nursing, and medicine. While these professions differ in content, methodology, ethics, and outcome, they are united by a common commitment to facilitating clients' growth and well-being. However, conceptualizing counseling as a helping profession immediately raises a critical question. What does helping in counseling really mean? A widely accepted answer to this question is offered by Brammer and McDonald in 1999, who defined helping as a process of enabling another human being to grow in the direction that the person chooses, to solve problems and face life crises. This definition is significant not only for what it says, but also for what it deliberately does not say. First, helping in the context of counseling is not about control, prescription, compulsion, or dominance. It is about enabling, facilitating, and empowering the clients to solve their problems. Several principles of counseling practice flow naturally from this understanding of helping. First, the counselor is not in the business of choosing for the client. The person who seeks counseling is regarded as responsible, reasonable, and capable of making meaningful choices about his or her life. The counselor, therefore, does not dictate solutions to the client or bear their consequences or assume responsibility for their decisions. From the foregoing, it can be inferred that the professional counselor does not encourage the client to depend on him at all times. On the contrary, the counselor's greatest professional fulfillment comes from witnessing his client become independent and capable of managing their challenges without the counselor's continued professional assistance. Therefore, empowerment, not dependence, is the hallmark of counseling as a helping profession. In summary, counseling as a helping profession fosters a purposeful, collaborative, and empowering helping relationship. It is structured but not coercive, active but not controlling, supportive yet ultimately liberating. By enabling individuals to understand themselves, make good choices, and make informed decisions, counseling produces efficient institutions, healthier relationships, and safer human societies. It is within this conceptual and professional framework that the topic of this lecture, in the multitude of counselors, there is safety, find its deepest meaning. As I will further demonstrate in this lecture, safetiness does not arise from the number of counselors alone, but from the quality, integrity, ethical, and professional grounding of the counseling relationship itself. Now, I want to describe my research on the safeness of counseling. The central argument of this inaugural lecture is that in the multitude of counselors, there is safety. This is not merely a philosophical or rhetorical statement. Rather, it is an empirical position arrived through my 3 decades of sustained research engagement with students, teachers, families, school administrators, and policy actors within the educational system. Taken together, my research efforts of 3 decades demonstrate a coherent research trajectory aimed at providing psychological safety, behavioral direction, institutional stability, and human capacity development across multiple layers of the education system. The earliest phase of my scholarly research focused squarely on students, particularly those grappling with academic demands, study habits, and career choices. My MA Ed thesis, Popoola 1995, and his subsequent journal publication, Popoola 1998, investigated the effects of a self-management training model on the study behavior of secondary school students. This study provided empirical evidence that structured counseling interventions can significantly enhance students' self-regulation, responsibility for learning, and effective study behavior. A major finding of the study was the significant improvement in students' study behavior in the experimental group following a controlled self-management training program. The study demonstrated that if students are trained in the therapeutic management of their study behavior, they will assume major responsibility for regulating their study and non-study behaviors with minimal counselor intervention. The results of the study further show that when students are guided to understand themselves and manage their behavior, they are better equipped to navigate educational choices and challenges with confidence and resilience. A second, more elaborate strand of my research activities addressed the human agent responsible for shaping learners' experiences, that is, teachers and counselors. My doctoral research, Popoola 2003, which was published in a series of journal articles, examined personality characteristics, demographic variables, and work attitudes as correlates of school counselor effectiveness. These studies collectively established that counselor effectiveness is not accidental. It is rooted in identifiable psychological traits, professional attitudes, and contextual variables. In more specific terms, the studies found significant positive relationships between counselor effectiveness and the personality characteristics of self-concept, extraversion, and locus of control, Popoola 2000 and Popoola 2003. Beyond individuals, many of my research efforts address the educational institution as a social system requiring insightful counseling. My collaborative study with my thesis supervisor, Awolowo and Popoola 1989, was on the crisis in Nigerian university education. The study analyzed systemic stressors undermining educational standards, highlighting the consequences of neglecting students and staff psychosocial needs. Here, counseling emerged as a stabilizing force, capable of mitigating conflict, stress, and institutional dysfunction. Similarly, my works on computer education, Afolabi et al. 1999, and classroom anthropological research in nursery education, Omotosho and Popoola 1989, demonstrated sensitivity to contextual and cultural factors in educational innovation. These studies underscored the need for counseling perspectives when introducing reforms, especially in environments marked by technological transition and childhood vulnerability. Counseling, in this sense, functioned as a bridge between policy intention and human adaptation. To further demonstrate the synergy between counseling and educational administration and governance, one of my publications focused on the role of government in the administration of primary education, Popoola and Bayode 2000. This work highlighted the responsibility of administrators and policy leaders whose decisions shape the destiny of schools and, by extension, nations. By identifying structural and administrative gaps, the study implicitly called for counseling-informed leadership, a leadership that recognizes the human consequences of policy decisions. Another study by Popoola and Oluwatos in 2002 examined multiple ratings of counselor effectiveness from the perspective of counselors, clients, and supervisors. The study demonstrated discrepancies and convergences in stakeholder perception of counselor effectiveness. The results underscore the ethical imperative that counselor effectiveness and counseling outcomes must be measured not merely by counselor self-assessment and self-report, but by all beneficiaries of counseling services. Safety here in the context of counseling is professional, relational, and rooted in trust, transparency, and counselor competence. This concern is further reinforced in another study by Popoola 2006, which identified correlates of counselor effectiveness in southwestern Nigeria, providing empirical guidance for recruitment, training, and supervision of counselors. Using data collected from practicing counselors drawn from 50 randomly selected secondary schools in 3 southwestern Nigerian states of Osun, Ondo, and Ekiti, the study identified the personality characteristics of self-concept, extraversion, locus of control, achievement motivation, counselor work attitudes, and some demographic variables as correlates of school counselor effectiveness. From the foregoing, it is interesting to note that certain predictor variables, which might reasonably be assumed to be associated with effective counselor performance, did not occur as significant predictors of counselor effectiveness. Overall, the results of the study position counselor effectiveness as a systemic safeguard for students navigating emotional, academic, and developmental challenges. As education entered the digital age, my research endeavors anticipated and focused on new vulnerabilities in the information age. Studies on computer literacy and gender differences among university staff, Idowu, Adagodo, and Popoola 2003, and on Nigerian women in information technology, Idowu and Popoola 2003, exposed inequalities that threatened professional relevance and inclusion. These studies framed digital competence as a form of educational safety, ensuring that staff and women educators are not marginalized in a globalizing knowledge economy. My research activities also included several studies conducted with a view to ensuring the safety of the school system and using counseling to protect clients and students from harm. Just as drinking some water will protect the inaugural lecturer from harm. That study, the Popoola study on peer victimization among secondary school students, investigated the prevalence of peer victimization among secondary school students in a state in southwestern Nigeria. Participants consisted of 385 secondary school students selected from 10 secondary schools across 10 local government areas in Osun State. Results obtained from descriptive and inferential analysis of data showed that the majority of participants reported an overall high level of peer victimization with attack on property as the most frequent form of peer victimization. There were significant differences between male and female participants on all forms of victimization, with females reporting higher levels of social victimization, verbal victimization, and attack on property than their male counterparts. My study on secret court in higher education, Popoola and Awolowo 2006, confronted institutional violence directly, extending the idea of safety in counseling from the psychological to the physical and moral realms. The study identified various reasons for the emergence of secret courts and discussed the consequences of court activities on Nigerian education. For a lasting solution to the problem of campus court, the study recommended establishing structures that recognize the existence and operation of fraternities on campuses, with the primary objective of restructuring, monitoring, and regulating their activities. In this study, counseling is positioned as both preventive and restorative, capable of addressing alienation, identity crisis, and peer influence that drive membership of court groups and promote destructive behavior by court members. From 2007 onward, a substantial body of my work focused on sexuality education, gender, sexual violence, safety, and protection. The motivation for this came from my exposure to sexuality research during my postdoctoral fellowship at the University of Amsterdam in 2006. Thereafter, several articles emerged on the intersection of sexuality and counseling, such as an investigation into female genital mutilation and parental attitudes in southwestern Nigeria, Popoola 2007, peer sexual harassment, Popoola 2008, sexual abuse in two communities undergoing conflicts, Popoola and Adeyemi 2009, and teachers' preparedness for sexuality education, Popoola 2009. These studies collectively expose the vulnerability of girls and women within the Nigerian education and social system and positioned counseling as advocacy, providing safety and protection in contexts where culture or tradition perpetuates sexual harm. Another study on sex negotiation strategies among married women, Popoola 2009, examined the strategies used by married women in negotiating sex with their partners, with the underlying hypothesis that safer sex practices are related to women's sex negotiation skills. This study extended the concept of safety in counseling into adulthood, marital relationships, reinforcing the idea that counseling supports lifelong well-being, including marital safety and sexual satisfaction within the context of a marital relationship. Considering the changing modes of interaction and communication in counseling in the digital age, my research activity also examined technology-mediated counseling interaction and processes. Several studies on online guidance and counseling, such as Adebowale and Popoola 2011, Popoola and Adebowale 2012, Adebowale, Popoola, Obishaki, and Aluede 2012, explored both the promises and ethical challenges of digital counseling environments. My work on intimacy and online relational communication, Popoola et al. 2012, addressed concerns about emotional authenticity and client safety in virtual spaces. Similarly, Popoola and Adebowale 2017 examined group processes and the sociology of counseling clients, reinforcing the idea that safety can also be collective, emerging through shared narratives, norms, and mutual support. Several other studies extended counseling protective role to emerging risks, such as gambling behavior, Oyebisi and Popoola 2012, internet addiction among university students, Omoyemiju and Popoola 2021, and teaching large classes during health emergency, Popoola, Ojediran, and Popoola 2021. These works demonstrated the role of counseling in mitigating societal crises and technological excesses. Finally, my most recent research work, Togonubikestet et al. 2022, Popoola et al. 2022, Popoola et al. 2024, focused on skip generation households and the vulnerability of the elderly in Nigeria. This study represents a generational expansion of my research vision. Through the emerging publications, I have shown that education intersects with aging, caregiving, and social protection, affirming the relevance of counseling as a stabilizing force across the lifespan. Viewed collectively, my research efforts and publications reveal a clear and consistent mission to use counseling research as a tool for safety, direction, and human development in education and society. Whether addressing children, adolescents, adults, educators, families, institutions, or national system, my research works have affirmed that psychological, emotional, physical, instructional, and school safeties are not accidental, but are intentionally designed, supported, and sustained through informed counseling practices and interventions. Thus, the multitude of counselors envisioned in this inaugural lecture is not defined by numbers alone, but by knowledge, ethics, adaptability, empirical grounding, contextual relevance, and empathy, which represent the very qualities that have permeated my scholarly and professional engagement. It is within this carefully cultivated multitude of counselors, trained, reflective, and research-driven, that individuals and nations alike find direction, resilience, safety, and renewed hope. From research evidence to action. Mr. Vice-Chancellor, sir, if the central claim of this inaugural lecture is that in the multitudes of counselors, there is safety, then the logical question to ask is, what must each education stakeholder do to translate this safety from research into lived experience and reality? Drawing from my 3 decades of empirical inquiry across schools, families, institutions, and communities, I wish to offer some recommendations as pathways for embedding counseling as a safe, stabilizing, and directional force within the Nigerian education landscape. Students, whether in secondary schools or universities, remain the most visible beneficiary of counseling interventions. The evidence from my studies on study behavior, procrastination, peer victimization, internet addiction, gambling behavior, and sexual harassment consistently indicates that students require structural support to make healthy academic and life choices. It is therefore recommended that students at all levels of education should be provided with effective counseling, self-management strategies, emotional regulation, and coping skills as part of the formal curriculum, rather than as remedial afterthoughts. Counseling intervention should not be restricted to secondary schools. Universities as centers of knowledge production and human capital development also face unique psychosocial challenges which require counseling. On the usefulness of counseling at the highest level of governance, the collective findings from my studies have brought me to a simple and fascinating conclusion that the crises confronting our nation today are fundamentally the absence or failures of counseling, and that this crisis can be resolved through the provision of counseling interventions by trained and experienced counselors. Corruption, nepotism, misappropriation, embezzlement of public funds, kidnapping for ransom, banditry, ritual killings, abuse of power, greed, insecurity, as well as other social vices are not socio-economic or socio-political problems per se. They are manifestations of distorted values, poor moral judgment, unresolved psychological conflicts, and a lack of psychological preparedness among political office holders. In many countries around the world, persons aspiring to hold public offices are usually required to undergo rigorous assessments and psychological evaluations before assuming sensitive positions. But in our country, Nigeria, such preparation is often absent. Aspirants to leadership positions are never subjected to structured counseling that examines their motivations for seeking power, their value system, their emotional maturity, and their mental capacity for decision-making. And because we do not do this, the result is that we select or elect into sensitive positions of responsibility those who have unresolved psychological needs, insatiable material desires, and poor moral convictions. The consequences are visible in the widespread corruption, mismanagement of national wealth, and social insecurity that continue to plague our dear nation. If we sincerely desire a nation where integrity prevails over corruption, where national resources are used for the good of the masses rather than plundered, and where service to the nation is no longer an avenue for personal enrichment, then we must begin with the transformation of the human mind. This is precisely where counseling becomes important and indispensable. I strongly believe that Nigeria will overcome its social crisis if we begin to subject everyone aspiring to leadership positions to mandatory psychological evaluation, value orientation, and emotional regulation through professional counseling interventions before they assume public office. Such interventions will help identify tendencies towards uncontrollable aggression, pathological greed, abuse of power, moral decadence, and other vices that are incompatible with responsible leadership. I therefore call on the federal government to immediately begin the process of institutionalizing mandatory psychological evaluation and structured professional counseling intervention for all individuals aspiring to hold public offices in Nigeria. Just as medical examinations are required for employment in the civil service, mental and psychological evaluation through structural counseling therapies should be made compulsory for public office holders. Such a policy will not only screen for emotional stability and moral disposition, but will also prepare prospective leaders for the enormous task, for the enormous demand and task of a public office. If the nation is to overcome its perennial problems of corruption, violence, greed, and moral decay among public office holders, we must move beyond treating symptoms and begin to heal and transform the human mind. A policy that makes counseling foundational to leadership preparation is what is needed to overcome the many challenges facing our dear nation. Mr. Vice-Chancellor, sir, in addition to my research engagements of about 3 decades, I have served the university in diverse administrative and leadership positions since my assumption of duty as an assistant lecturer in 1997. Such positions include serving as Deputy Provost of the Postgraduate College and then Dean of the Faculty of Education. In each of these positions, I have prioritized academic excellence and administrative integrity in the discharge of my responsibilities. I have also contributed to strategic academic planning, including chairing curriculum committees and serving as member of the strategic plan drafting committee of the university. At national and international levels, I have a productive history of academic and administrative engagement. I have participated in many research work at both national and international levels. I have served as research consultant to the School Health Unit of the Federal Ministry of Education, the UNICEF, and the International Organization for Migration. I served as member of the Governing Council of ADEBAYO College of Education, Ondo, and the Teachers Registration Council of Nigeria, representing deans of education in Nigerian universities. I have collaborated with professional colleagues in different parts of the world in conducting academic research, which has exposed me to global best practices in the conduct of research and other academic engagement, such as attending international conferences, workshops, and seminars in different countries in Africa, Asia, Europe, and the United States. Mr. Vice-Chancellor, sir, this inaugural lecture will be incomplete if I do not share with my august audience, especially those in administrative positions in our universities, what I consider the correct application of counseling to university administration. My divine appointment as Vice-Chancellor of ADEBAYO Federal University of Education, Ondo, has equipped me with invaluable administrative experience and afforded me a deeper appreciation and understanding of the indispensability of counseling, and the caution required is in its adoption in university administration. From the very first day of my assumption of office, I was confronted with a steady and unrelenting flow of counsels from diverse interest groups within and outside the university community, such as academic, professional, administrative, political, union-based, and socio-cultural and religious groups. These counsels, though often eloquently presented, were not uniform in their intent and purpose. While some were driven by unclear motives, others were sincerely presented as genuine commitment to institutional growth and development. Yet, another category was softly crafted to create fear or just to gain recognition and attention. These experiences have opened my eyes to an important leadership reality, that while the Vice-Chancellor cannot function effectively in isolation, I must take counsel from all. He must also exercise discernment, vigilance, and moral clarity in weighing the counsels he receives. The Vice-Chancellor must be receptive to counseling, yet he must never be a slave to it. Advising leaders, particularly in complex organizations such as university, is rarely value-free. It is often shaped by the advisor's interests, loyalties, and sometimes unspoken ambitions. As leadership and counseling scholars have noted, advice is rarely neutral, and its value lies not merely in its content, but in the intent, context, and power dynamics from which it emerges. Thus, advice given in organizational contexts often reflects power dynamics as much as professional concern, requiring the recipient to exercise discernment, emotional intelligence, and ethical judgment. The Vice-Chancellor, therefore, must constantly interrogate not only the content of the counsels given to him, but must understand why the counsel is given, by who, and to what end. Ultimately, while counseling is desirable, responsibility for counseling remains personal. The Vice-Chancellor must know that he bears full responsibility for the decisions taken by him after receiving counsel, and must be prepared for the consequences that follow. It therefore becomes imperative for him to keep his binoculars firmly in place at all times, to be able to distinguish the chaff from the grain, so that the counsel he accepts advances the common good of the university rather than the personal interests of a few. In this lecture, I have affirmed that counseling, when grounded in ethical practice and professional integrity, is both safe and indispensable for leaders. Equally, I have advised caution regarding counsel that originates within organizational hierarchies, especially from subordinates whose perspectives may be beclouded by power dynamics, role ambiguity, or personal interest. At first glance, this position may appear contradictory. How can counseling be both safe and essential, and yet warrant caution? This contradiction is only superficial. At the core, both positions emphasize discernment, relational integrity, and reflective practice as the criteria for effective advice and counsel in leadership. Resolving the contradiction lies in professional counseling from professional counseling is anchored in long-standing theoretical frameworks, empirical evidence, and ethical standards that support self-awareness, decision-making, and adaptive leadership. In retrospect, my experience as a sitting vice-chancellor has not contradicted my long-standing perception of counseling as a safety net for all education stakeholders. It has also not invalidated my thesis in this lecture that in the multitude of counselors, there is safety. Rather, it has confirmed it by emphasizing that effective leadership in Nigerian higher education demands not only administrative competence, but a counseling-informed sensitivity that enables the Vice-Chancellor to listen deeply, discern wisely, and act ethically in the midst of complex human and institutional dynamics. Mr. Vice-Chancellor, sir, I now proceed to my acknowledgements. And I want to begin by expressing my appreciation to the Vice-Chancellor, all the 3 Deputy Vice-Chancellors, and other principal officers of this university for providing the enabling environment for this lecture. Without the understanding and approval of the Vice-Chancellor, the delivery of this lecture would have been further. Thank you, sir, for this irrecability. Tell my Vice-Chancellor when he comes that I appreciate him. I thank my spiritual fathers who have at all times supported me with prayers. There are so many of them, but because of the short time I have, I mentioned Pastor M.A. Imevore, Pastor C. Onukaugu, Pastor Akimbami, Pastor Olujobi, Pastor Obisesan, all of them, and many others of the CAC Mountbatten Church, Ile-Ife. And to save time, I have listed their names in the lecture notes. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, God has been very gracious to me in many ways. He gave me the rare privilege of having great mentors, wonderful friends, and academic colleagues. I would like to single out Dr. J.A. Adeyoju for special recognition on this occasion and to express my profound gratitude to him and his wife for their invaluable contributions to my career development. Dr. Adeyoju is not here, but his amiable wife is here represented. Mommy, you are well recognized, man. Besides supervising my master's degree in counseling, Dr. Adeyoju played a vital role in making me who I am today through a destiny-changing encounter that I had with him in 1997. As at that time, the mobile phone technology was non-existent in Nigeria. And unknown to me, I had been shortlisted for an interview in the Faculty of Education for the position of assistant lecturer. The university had no means of getting across to me because there was no phone. But Dr. Adeyoju volunteered to travel by public transport to Akure, where I was then serving as a classroom teacher on a rainy Sunday afternoon, just to inform me of the interview scheduled for the following day in Ile-Ife. If he had not made that journey, I will not be here today delivering an inaugural lecture. So I remain very deeply grateful for your mentorship, friendship, and spiritual support over the year. Thank you, sir, for all you did to change the trajectory of my life. Similar appreciation goes to my PhD supervisor and great mentor, the indefatigable, irresistible, ever agile, and light-hearted Professor Bayode Ile-Ife. Where are you, sir? Thank you, sir. Professor Bayode Ile-Ife was the former Dean of Education and former Chairman of the Committee of Deans of this university. Thank you, sir, for believing in me and for your interest in my progress. When Professor Ile-Ife believes in you, he will fight your cause to an extent that you will never believe. Time will not permit me to say all that Professor Ile-Ife has done for me, but permit me to mention just one. In 2003, my promotion to the rank of senior lecturer was stepped down by the University Appointments and Promotion Committee. I was very devastated by it. The following year, Professor Ile-Ife assumed office as my head of department. With a show of uncommon courage, he took the same CV that I had presented the previous year, removed a few of the publications, and got my promotion to senior lecturer approved by the university A&PC and backdated to the previous year. Thank you, Oga, for your contributions to my career advancement. I cannot fail to mention Professor Koya Ogen, a great scholar and a wonderful friend. Prof, you are duly recognized. Our friendship was forged at a time when many had wished that we ought to be at loggerheads. Yes, Professor Ogen shows understanding and mutual respect. I remain deeply grateful to God for bringing our paths together. I sincerely thank Professor OAU Balogun, former Vice-Chancellor of the Federal University of Agriculture, Abeokuta, for his mentorship and selfless investment in my career development. When I say investment in me, people who know Professor Balogun know that he can invest his resources on anyone he believes in. Thank you, sir, for your investment in my career advancement. I also wish to specially acknowledge Professor Fumi Tugonu Biscuit State, whose decision in 2017, Mommy, you are duly recognized, man, whose decision in 2017 to bring me into her research group marked a defining turning point in my academic journey. That single act of confidence reshaped my scholarly trajectory, and for this, I remain deeply grateful. My appreciation to all members of the third form skill generation, elderly vulnerability, and large class research groups for the knowledge shared while working together in the last few years. I appreciate all my mentees for their academic companionship over the years. I would like to appreciate all former deans in the Faculty of Education with whom I worked at one time or another. They include Professor O.J. Ehidero. Prof, you are very much appreciated, sir, for being a good mentor and a great supporter. Professor Eme Adeleke is one of them, Professor B.A. Omotesho, and Professor T.O. Bello. I equally appreciate the current dean, Professor A. Adeduwura, and the entire members of the Faculty of Education, especially my colleagues in the Department of Counseling and Human Development. All of them have served as the local organizing committee of this inaugural lecture. I appreciate your good work. I'm grateful to all my mentees and postgraduate students. It's heartwarming that at the last count, I have supervised 31 postgraduate students. 12 of them at the doctoral level. Of this number, 4 are now professors. 1 has completed his term as Vice-Chancellor, and another one is currently a Deputy Vice-Chancellor in one of Nigeria's most prestigious universities. I thank all of you for your academic companionship over the years. I owe a profound debt of gratitude to the entire academic community of the Adeyemi Federal University of Education, represented here by all the principal officers of the university, members of the Governing Council and the University Senate, deans of faculty and heads of department for their unwavering support, and particularly for giving me the rare privilege of serving the university as its first substantive Vice-Chancellor. I appreciate the remarkable sacrifice that all of you have made, traveling all the way from Ondo at your own expense to Ile-Ife to share the joy of this scholarly moment with me. I appreciate you. I do not take it for granted. My sincere gratitude also goes to the Afued Alumni Association, all the staff unions in the university, ASU, SANU, NASU, and NAT. All of them are represented here. And our dear students for their maturity, understanding, and sustained efforts in ensuring peace and stability on our campus. I warmly thank His Royal Majesty Oba Dr. Victor Kiladejo de Oshemawe and the good people of Ondo Kingdom for their hospitality, warmth, and enduring goodwill, which continue to make Adeyemi Federal University not just an institution, but a home for my family. My sincere appreciation to all my friends, classmates, well-wishers, and family members from the Fountain of Knowledge, Ekiti State. Thank you all for expressions of love and solidarity, which have been for me an inspiration over the years. I acknowledge the unflinching support of Egbe Omo Ikere Ile-Ife branch, under the able leadership of G.O. Akomolafe and the companionship of the 1982 set of Ekiti Teachers College Alumni Association, led by Professor Jami Oluwatoki. May the good Lord grant all of you travel masses to your respective destination. On this occasion, words are inadequate to express my gratitude to 2 remarkable women who have shaped the very course of my life. My late mother, Madam Esther Fentola Popoola, and my customized wife, Dr. Temilola Janet Popoola. My mother was 1 in a million, a rare abiyamo, as the Yorubas will say. Though she passed on 11 years ago, I feel her presence every day. Her parenting style, moral standards, and approach to child discipline and training made me better off than many of my contemporaries who had both parents and whose parents had all the resources to train them. May the Lord continue to grant her eternal rest. I remain profoundly grateful to all her siblings who stood by her and supported my educational journey. Their love and sacrifice laid the foundation upon which my life and career now stand. Dr. Temilola Jene Popoola Nia Jibare is the second woman who has shaped the very course of my life. Temilola has been more to me than a wife. For 35 years now, she has been my friend, my confidant, my counselor, my prayer partner, my advisor, my colleague, my dietitian, my exercise physiologist, and of recent, my unofficial personal assistant. I fondly called her my customized wife because of my conviction that God took his time and deliberately and uniquely designed her to complement me, to strengthen me where I am weak, and to caution me where I stubbornly feel that I am strong. I cannot thank her enough for tolerating my imperfections, especially for enduring my frequent travels and long nights of work, both in the office and at home. I thank her for the grace, patience, and love with which she has walked this journey with me. I pray for a day like this, when, as she is doing now, I will sit among the audience while she delivers her own inaugural lecture. I am also deeply thankful to our faithful, peaceful, joyful daughters and lovely son for being precious gifts whose presence fills our home with love, peace, faith, and joy. I must appreciate our grandchildren, Iriayo and Joshua, and all my in-laws, especially the Ajibares, the Adebayos, the Aribisalas, the Oninides, the Onis, the Olajides, and the Adelekes. All of you have been sources of encouragement to me. In bringing this lecture to a close, the greatest of my appreciation goes to the Almighty God, who is my anchor, my redeemer, and the pillar of my life. The only one who constantly turns all my disappointment to blessings and ensures that even when men deny me favor, it often turns out to be blessings in disguise for me. Besides, he has been my sustenance and great provider, whose faithfulness is renewed every day in my life. And that is why my favorite song has always been, "Great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hands have provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me." Mr. Vice-Chancellor, sir, I crave your indulgence to finally end this lecture in the same manner our Lord Jesus Christ ended his inaugural lecture, delivered in the synagogue at Nazareth, as captured in the book of Luke, chapter 4, verses 18 to 20. On that occasion, Jesus had concluded his lecture by reading from the book of Prophet Isaiah. Incidentally, I am Professor Isaiah. The book of Isaiah reads, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he anointed me to preach good tidings to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to set at liberty them that are bruised, and to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord." Just as God has anointed me to use counseling, to preach and proclaim recovery of sight to the blind, and to set at liberty those that are victimized and bruised. The Bible says in Luke chapter 4, verse 19, that after concluding his lecture, Jesus closed the book, as I'm closing my lecture notes now, and handed it over to the attendant, just as I'm going to hand over my lecture notes in this instance to the Vice-Chancellor. And thereafter, the Bible says, Jesus sat down on his chair, as I continue to sit henceforth on my professional chair. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for listening. God bless you all.
mercy. Thank you very much. Can we have our seats? This is the time to present sacrifice.
If it had not been for your mercy, let's go.
417th inaugural lecture titled "In the Multitude of Councillors in the City."
Somebody lift up a shout. If it had not been for your grace, Ore official Morida.
Especially
If it had not been for your mercy,
who has been described in the superlatives.
I know Shani Morida. And you say, if it had not been for your grace, Ore official.